Hi, Anne Marie. Long time no see.
I know. It's been mere minutes.
I only ever see you on a computer screen. I don't believe
I
that you
know.
exist in
I've
real life.
gotten taller, but you wouldn't know that.
Yeah, Anne Marie and I were laughing. Those of you who are watching this, because we have a friend who has repeatedly turned herself into like a vegetable somehow on Zoom. So like she was a potato once, and she was a carrot apparently
Yeah,
yesterday.
and she can't get out of being a piece of produce on these calls. And like, bless her. And she sends us the screenshot of like her boss and everyone looking very intensely. And she's a potato or a carrot, bless
Yeah,
her.
good. So we should figure that out, and for our next video, we'll do that, and maybe we'll get more subscribers if we're pieces of produce.
I'm
We'll see.
gonna try. Would
Right.
you love us more if we
Yeah.
were a cat or a potato? Just a question.
Yeah. So drop that in the comments. Let us know what you think.
Yeah.
But until then, we are here today to talk a little bit about story listening. And, a lot of what we do in training focuses obviously on the structure of story, how you can use story. But we see this a lot, particularly with, attorneys, forensic accountants, scientists, people in those types of fields. They really want to know how they can mobilize this tool for their verbal and their written communications. But I think what sometimes gets lost is, to be robust in your field and to get clients and to retain clients and to build feedback to build trust with internal stakeholders or people you're giving feedback to, you've got to be a good story listener. And that's not a skill that everyone has cultivated. So let's talk a little bit about that, Anne Marie. Like, what is story listening, first of all, and how do we become better story listeners?
So this is something we talk a lot about in leadership training, that there's hyper focus on delivering feedback, teaching, telling stories. There's less focus on the receiving end. There's less focus about listening. Really good business development people are excellent listeners. That is why, despite popular beliefs, introverts can be excellent business development people, because they are so superb at listening. I think it's important not to push people along. People will often want to inject their own story. They basically want to hijack somebody's story. This drives Holly crazy, because we know
Insane.
some people who do this. So the example would be, I'm sharing a story and Holly would be, oh my God, that happened to me. Or, oh, well, you're lucky. You should have heard what happened to my friend Sarah. Oh my gosh. And it's this way of hijacking and taking ownership of somebody's voice. And the problem with that is, on the most basic level, every human wants to be seen and heard and understood. And when you're doing that, you're saying, you don't matter. And your story isn't as important as my story. And I see this so frequently. I'll give you a great example. Sometimes when I'm observing presentations or training, somebody in the audience will raise a hand and ask a question, and the presenter will go, did that answer your question? And they'll go, I mean, not really. And they'll go, okay, great. And they'll go, next question. And you're like, they literally just said, do you know? And you did not even take that. That you are screaming to people that you are not present, you're not listening, and that you actually don't care. Yeah. And so the inability to listen and be open and ask people questions, Holly talks about this a lot as a former reporter, just being intellectually curious about someone and asking questions serves you so well, that you have to be quiet and listen. And the other thing I think is, don't do nonverbal interrupting, like, like it feels like you're literally like poking someone in their back. Let them get there and just be present for somebody. To me, some of the hardest work you'll do is just being still and being quiet in the presence of somebody's story.
It's so true. I mean, and Anne Marie and I talk to each other a million times a day, and we're interrupting each other like constantly.
We do. But
we're terrible at this. But I definitely know, I have my own nonverbal and verbal tics, and I think and these develop like very early on. Like, these are like learned behaviors and habits that you have to break, right? So I just, for something that you can practice at home, if you're watching this, like, be aware of if your partner or your spouse or your kids are talking to you, are you letting them finish what they're saying, or are you interjecting? I mean, I think a lot of times we think if we interject, like, yeah, uh-huh, like, is this resonating with anyone? You probably do this, right? We think that that conveys empathy and that we're with them, but really it's just a constant, it's like the equivalent of getting constant text messages on your phone when you're trying to say something.
Yeah.
Like, it diverts your attention. So really be cognizant, like, keep track. We're all quarantining, so you're not probably seeing tons of people or in a big meeting where we would be doing this, but or presenting in a traditional sense where there's an audience physically. But start it with the people that you're around. And then, when you're doing webinars or you're on Zoom meetings, I don't know, Anne-Marie, tell me what you think about this, but I feel like with Zoom meetings, it is a little harder to do that, right? Like, I do think people are a little more restrained and are less interrupty, although I could be wrong.
In general, Zoom is just different. It's challenging us in new ways I think it's really challenging people to be present. I think somehow in video, people behave in a checked out way that they would never do. If you were in a meeting, you wouldn't be walking around on Zoom.
Yeah.
When you're doing that, or why are you flitting in and out? You wouldn't be doing that if you were in an office. You wouldn't be like going out, coming back, doing that. Right. It's really disruptive to people. And I think it's also just disrespectful to people. I understand we're in a different time. People's kids walk in, things happen. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about not honoring people's time and being present and engaged in the moment, which is also its own form of listening, and also just treating people's time with respect.
Yeah. And another thing I'll say, just about the story listening piece, people will ask, well, how can I be a better story listener, right? We covered a little bit of that. But I also think, you want to be asking these wildly curious questions, like, why? How? Tell me how that happened. Tell me more about that. That's a great way to sort of draw a person out. And I think one of the things I learned early on when I was is that I would ask like 4 questions all at once. And I felt the need to like continue talking, just sort of fill space, rather than remembering, oh no, I'm asking this question because I want to hear what this person has to say. So I'm going to ask one question and then I'm going to shut my mouth. And I'm actually going to listen.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things I think for us to do.
It's really hard. And I will just make a caveat, because this is such a generalized video. Why is a great question when you're interviewing a potential client? It's a terrible question for leadership. Terrible. Yeah. Never ask somebody why. You wouldn't, when your kid cuts their hair, you don't go, why did you do that? Because no good answer. And it immediately creates a defensiveness in people. So I just say that for people listening who think we're talking about this from a leadership perspective. Not so much. It's great in a networking environment. We have a friend, the friend who's a potato and carrot, actually, Holly. I hope potato carrot tunes into this.
Yeah.
Every time somebody meets her at one of my parties, when I used to have parties pre-pandemic, they always say, oh my God, I have never met anyone who was so interested in me. All she does is ask, because she is wildly curious about people. She's like, that's so interesting. So what made you decide to go into that? That's interesting. How did you come to that? Do you think you're always going to do that? She's wildly curious, and people feel heard and seen. And that is such a testament to her ability to just be generous to people. So some of story listening is about generosity.
Absolutely. And if my best friend Marisa is watching this, Marisa, you are that person as well. I always say that she has this uncanny ability to make you feel like you're the only person in any room. And that's because she is so intimately interested in what you're saying. And she's not just asking questions to ask questions. She actually wants to know why. And so Marisa, big props to you.
Marisa and Michelle, you guys are great listeners.
Squared. And we should do a video on story listening and leadership, because I think you're right. That's a whole specific subset. So if you're interested in that, if you're watching this, drop a comment, let us know, send us an email. We would love to talk about that. And we would love to have feedback from the people that are watching this about what you guys want. So have a great rest of your week, Anne-Marie. Thanks as always for your time. That green's really working for you.
Why, thank you.
Bye.